Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Thoughts of the Young Icon with me, Sam. Today, I want to talk about something that I'm not entirely comfortable talking about, but something that I believe is very useful that we need to discuss, which is politics. You see, we live in a world which is governed by politicians. And if we don't have an understanding, or if we have the wrong understanding and the wrong idea of how politics works, or what politicians are meant to do, versus what they actually do, then we can find ourselves in a tricky situation. So in this video, I'm going to talk about my understanding of politicians, what they're supposed to do, but most importantly, what's actually going on. Don't live on assumptions, like understand what's going on and then make decisions based on what's going on, especially with next year being an election year. Enjoy the video. I have a very different perspective to politics to most people, I believe. I think I have lived through a time in Malawi, to be specific, whereby we have seen, a lot of politicians come into the play. We've had, between the time I was born, actually, the time I was in college, when I was in first year, we had one president. A couple years later, we had a different president. Before I finished uni, and I was in uni for 5.5 years, we had another president. So I've seen a lot of presidents, and I am someone who likes to analyze what is actually going on. I'm someone who likes to look at things outside of face value and try and read in between the lines. And these are the conclusions that I have arrived at from my analysis. Politics, as they say, is a dirty game. Politics is a game played by people who are trying to get in power. Many of us have a tendency to think that politicians are there to be good leaders, or politicians are there to take over a country because they have good intentions for a country. That's utopian thinking. I'll be perfectly honest with you. That's utopian thinking. Politicians, yes. The ideal politician is someone who is very well educated, someone who has the technical expertise, the technical know-how, and a good team to execute a development plan for a country to enrich everyone. Yes, that's the utopian ideology behind politics. However, the reality is politicians, their number one skill, in fact, the only real skill you need in order to be a successful politician, is the ability to convince people to vote for you. Think about that. The only skill that you need to be a politician is the ability to convince people to vote for you. It doesn't matter your educational background, especially here in Malawi. It doesn't matter your experience. It doesn't even really matter your track record. In order to get into a political position, the number one thing that you need is the ability to convince people to vote for you. Now, with this in mind, it becomes evidently clear that if the only requirement that is there for me to become a politician is for me to be able to convince people to vote for me, then a liar can easily get into power. Someone who can promise one thing and not be able to deliver can easily get into power. Someone who, with all their good heart, someone who has the best of intentions, can become a politician. They can win a seat in parliament. They can become a minister. They could even become a president. Like, it's possible. Like, it's 100% possible based off of this premise that a good politician is simply someone who can convince you to vote for them. Now, ideally, what you'd want is to have a politician who is a leader. Okay, so how am I defining leadership? Leaders are people who have the technical know-how, they have the ability to execute, and then they have the experience, and they know the systems, how they work, and the ability to make them work so that they get the desired results. Leadership is about managing people. Leadership is about managing resources. Leadership is about managing and leading, setting an example. However, what we have seen, and it's not just a case here in Malawi, it's just the case, worldwide, you tend to see that there are so many politicians who are not leaders. Ideally, you'd want your leaders to be in politics, but that's actually not the case. Many times, if you look at a lot of people who are technically sound, a lot of people with proven track records, a lot of people who you would think would run a country very well, many of them are not politicians. Many of them can hardly convince you to vote for them into power. Many of them, the ones who we believe, because again, it all becomes theoretical, because heck, if they could do what we think they could do, then why are they not proving to us? Why are they not convincing us? Why are they not telling us things for us to believe them and vote for them and see them implement those things? So what I know is politicians are people who get into power, but not all politicians are leaders. Ideally, your politicians should be leaders, but sometimes they're not. And I think we have, especially here in Malawi as a people, we have the wrong perception of what politicians are supposed to do. And we have the wrong perception of who we think should lead us. I've noted with great concern, especially in some of the lower roles, we don't even need to go as far as MP, you talk of councillors and even MP. The minimum requirement for MP is a Form 4 certificate. Now, I have no personal qualm with that, but intellectually I have a qualm with that. You're saying this guy who is going to decide things that are going to affect the entire population of the nation. This guy, the minimum qualification that he requires is a secondary school certificate. And then we allow people with just secondary school certificates who are good politicians. Remember, politicians. This guy has no technical skills. This guy has no way of implementing the good things that he desires. I mean, I'm going to pretend here that politicians want good things for the citizens, but I'll also give you my honest opinion. I don't believe politicians are in power to help the citizenry. I believe that politicians are in power to enrich themselves. I think politicians look at politics as just another job. The same way a marketer is going to convince you to buy Nike as opposed to Adidas, or a marketer is going to put a banner for one bank so that you see it and then you choose that bank as opposed to another bank. And that's what pays the bills for them. I feel like a lot of people view politics in that same way. All that they try to do is get into power and they play the game. They play the game for 5 years so that when their term elapses, they're still playing the game so that you vote them back into power. Remember, they're not being leaders. Many times they're not being leaders so that, it's like through leadership, they create development, they create progress for the country. No, I mean, if they were educated, then, okay. Let me give this example, and let me compare and contrast. Yes, compare and contrast. That's the word I'm looking for. The USA, the most democratic nation in the world. If you look at their democracy and why it works, it's very simple. Their politicians, mostly, I want to say perhaps 90% or even more, are lawyers. Like if you look at the Senate, if you look at a lot of the governors, if you look at their presidents, most of them have been lawyers. Most of them have been, highly educated, trained, highly disciplined, people who have served in the military, people of high pedigree, even as a human being. Like when you look at them as candidates, even before they're presented as politicians, man, these guys are people who are true leaders and accomplished in many ways. So these are the people who are pushing democracy, and for good reason. I mean, in America, in order to become a lawyer, you need to have a first degree in something else, and then you have a second degree in law. So the minimum these guys were talking of about 8 years of tertiary education. And then they have practical experience in leadership in various roles in their companies, in the militaries, in the business sector, in the public sector. And then eventually they go up into the government system. if you see a government that's run by that caliber of people, obviously that government is going to run well. Like, if you just look at the caliber of people and the way the democratic system works, if you have that caliber of people making the decisions, then the decisions are going to be good decisions generally. Like, yes, there's going to be a few bad decisions. It's possible. However, just by looking at the caliber of people, they're going to mostly make good decisions. Now, in contrast, in Malawi, where the minimum requirement, I'm not too sure what the minimum requirement is in the US, but whatever the case, most of the people who do end up in parliament or who do end up in politics and, leading roles in politics end up very educated people. Whereas in Malawi, on the other hand, the minimum qualification is low. You can become an MP simply because you attend a lot of funerals. You can become an MP simply because you understand people's problems or you answer phone calls when people call you. You can become an MP simply because you handed out some money to people and you convinced them, not on any proven track record or anything. So in Malawi here, we end up with a system where almost anyone, as long as you can convince people, almost anyone can become an MP or can enter parliament. Do you think these two systems of government, do you think these two governments, do you think they can work in the same way? I mean, yes, both of them are democratic, but do you think their democracy is going to be the same? Do you think that our Malawian system with the people that we put into government versus the United States, quote unquote, almost perfect democracy with the caliber of people that they put into government, do you think our countries will be run in the same way? I'm going to answer that question for you, even if you choose not to answer. The answer is no. It's no, 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 no. It's not possible. The one in the US is going to run a lot better than the one in Malawi. And it's not to say that in Malawi there are no educated people. No, the educated people are there. Plenty of them. They're just not in the government system. Simple as that. In the US, are there educated people? Are they not educated people? Yes, there's a lot of people who are not educated. It's just very few of them seep through into the government system. Whereas here, a lot of uneducated people seep through into the government system, and we're still, once we put them in power, we don't allocate them in the areas of their strengths. In my opinion, many of them don't really have strengths, so you just kind of throw them wherever there's a position. You don't have the strength, but you're an MP. You need to be in this committee. These are the MPs that have been voted into power. We need a cabinet. We need ministers. Hey, who seems like they could do a good job? It's not who is fit for the job. It's who seems like they can do a good job. Anyways, I'm rambling. But the point that I'm trying to drive at is politicians are not people who are good leaders. Politicians are people who are good at convincing people to vote for them. Now, another important thing that I want to come across in this video is the fact that no politician is ever going to make the country rich. It's not possible. Okay, we need to understand that governments are not there to make the citizens rich. There's no government in the world that is making its citizens rich. Especially here in Malawi, we need to understand that in our system, the government, most of the politicians are self-seeking. So we need to understand that from the word go. The government and the people are self-seeking. With that in mind, let us understand that your government, no matter what promises they make to you, especially our government, they are not going to make you rich. No, they will not. The best that a government can do, and this is across the world, the best that a government can do is to create an enabling environment where the citizenry have the ability to enrich themselves through hard work. Capitalism is the system of governance that is being advocated for throughout the world, and it's the one that's been adopted in most of the world. And so the only thing that a government can truly do to help its citizenry is to create an enabling environment. And for me, when I look at the manifestos for the parties, when I hear the speeches of the presidents in the next coming months, with the elections coming up next year, the only thing that I'm going to be looking for is who is talking about creating an enabling environment. Because if they're making me promises that they'll give me this, they'll give me that, I'm not voting for them. I will not. If they tell me that they're going to make I don't know, fertilizer cheaper, cooking oil, I'm not voting for you. For me, what I want is a government that's going to create stability, a government that is going to create infrastructure developments that are going to enable a good network, a good distribution network for markets. Is going to create a situation whereby people can easily access, the fundamentals, the basics. So by creating that enabling environment, that is what is going to convince me to vote for X or Y. I, as a businessman, as someone who's an entrepreneur, I think one of the things that I value the most is just stability in our foreign exchange. Like, in the last couple of years, we've seen some drastic shifts in respect with devaluations of the kwacha. And I think, to me, that's the worst kind of instability that any government can bring. And I know it's not something which, is within the control of our governments, because I also understand economic principles where there's larger parts at play, there's larger elements at play. But man, if a government can come in and let's just say they devalue the kwacha by, I don't know, to the dollar, it gets to 10,000. But they promise us that they're going to hold it at 10,000 for 10 years. To me, that's better than, gradual devaluations or whatever. That stability that it would then provide is something which would enable business people to be able, for the first time in a very long time, to plan for a 10-year period. I wish you could understand what it means to be able to plan for a 10-year period. Even if today seems very tough, but if I can make a plan today that is going to cover the next 10 years, then I have an environment where I can truly better my life and the lives of anyone in this nation. Now, we have seen a lot of devaluations. We've seen a lot of tough times. We've seen a lot of calls. And, from the bottom of my heart, it saddens me. It saddens me when I see the quality of life of the typical Malawian just drastically reduce, the cost of living just unbearably increase. Like, it breaks my heart. And one of the things that I think, like, I'm passionate about and like I detest with all my heart is the fact that the leaders that we select, I don't know, their priorities are they're just off, man. Like, I like to think of how the people in the high positions in government and how a lot of the government expenditure now literally just goes to vehicles. A Prado vehicle, a Toyota Prado, it costs in excess of 300 million. And how many Prados is our government buying every year? If you get a good position in government, it's a Prado job. How many Prados is the government buying every year? Like, why is it buying Prados? Like, why does anyone need a Prado? Like that's a question someone needs to answer me. Like, if you're driving a Prado, it means that you're going on off-road all the times. Like, why does anyone need a Prado as opposed to, let's say, a Toyota Corolla Cross? Like, someone just give me a justification. Like, I'm looking for a justification. Like, I'm not saying that I'm right, but my question is simply, on the roads of Malawi, what is the difference between driving a Toyota Prado versus a Toyota Corolla Cross? I can tell you the difference. The difference is 200 million kwacha. The Prado costs 200 million more than the Toyota Corolla Cross. Like 200 million kwacha. So that means if there's, I don't know how many ministries there are in Malawi, and that's my bad, but ministries, so you talk of ministers, you talk of government departments, you talk of parastatals. I want to assume that, okay, I'll be conservative. I'll say there's 100 people who work for government who receive taxpayer money, funded corporations or departments that have 100 Prados. So we're saying we will spend 100 times 300 million. We are spending 30 billion on Prados. What if we don't spend 30 billion on Prados? Instead, this is just an idea. We buy Toyota Crosses. We spend 8 billion, which is still ridiculous in my opinion. We spend 8 billion on Toyota Crosses, and then we save 22 billion, and we use that 22 billion to buy medicine for hospitals. What do you think of that idea? Is that a bad idea? Because at the end of the day, all we're saying is these are vehicles, these are luxury vehicles. We are a poor nation. We don't need luxury, we need practicality. And on top of that, we need medicine in our hospitals. We need better roads. We need our teachers' salaries paid on time. Why is it that a company is going to prioritize buying their CEO a Prado when they are in losses and they will retrench people? The price of a Prado can literally pay wages for most companies' entire payroll. But no, our politicians think it's better to have a Prado. Before I get myself into trouble, what I will say is this is the first part of this video of politicians and politics, because I want you, my viewers, to have a different perspective and to have a different understanding, a different outlook as to what politicians and what politics actually does for a country. You know, we have our elections coming up next year. It is important to be informed. It is important to make informed decisions. If you've watched this far, I'd like you to hit that like button. I'd like you to hit subscribe. And don't forget to tell a friend about Thoughts of the Young Icon. Thank you.